Hello, my wild friends, and welcome back to another episode of She's Wild and Freed. I want to introduce to you all my guest today. Her name is Claire Ketchum, and she's the founder of the Peaceful Eating Method and Healthy Habits Coaching for Teens. She is a certified health coach through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, a certified transformational nutrition coach through the Institute of Transformative Nutrition, and holds a BS in psychology and a master's in education. She is on a mission to teach moms how to help their teens maintain a feel-good weight and positive body image in school and beyond, so they never yo-yo diet and always feel confident and happy in their own skin. I really enjoyed this conversation with Claire. She gives us tangible and tactical tips on how we can support our teens when they're in this phase of their life. It's not about telling them what to do or solving problems for them, but really supporting them, validating their feelings, and helping them figure this crazy life out. So please enjoy my conversation with Claire. Hey y'all, my name's Jen. I'm a health and life coach on a mission to empower women, and this season I call the messy middle. We believe it's never too late to dream your wildest dreams and to build lives freed from the shoulds and have-tos. Here, we talk to ourselves like we do our girlfriends and our sisters and daughters. I will share stories and resources with lots of encouragement and a little bit of tough love to drive you toward action. In this podcast, we talk about everything: career, relationships, motherhood, and health. So grab your sneakers and let's go, because she's wild and freed. Welcome, Claire, to She's Wild and Freed. I am so happy to have you here with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, so you and I met through a Facebook community, and I'm so excited to share what you do and who you are with the listeners of this podcast. So if you'll just start out, tell us a little bit about you. You can go back to the beginning with your story or wherever you want to go, and so we can get to know you better.
Sure. Well, what's sort of got me on this road was being introduced to mindful eating. And so I had been dieting for 20 years, basically to weigh the same amount of weight. But I spent a lot of time and energy trying to lose like the same 5 to 10 pounds over and over again. And it really dictated a lot of my social life and a lot of, even time with my kids when they were little. And so when I was introduced to mindful eating, I was so excited about it. And I was telling everybody about it. And nobody really cared about this. I read Janine Roth's book, Women, Food, and God. And that was what sort of was the introduction. And I was so excited. And I really wanted to share it with people, but I didn't really know how to do that. But I was sort of doing it with my kids. And then my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And at that point in time, and I know it's different now. So if you know anything about type 1 diabetes, like this is not how it is anymore, but this is what it was like when she was diagnosed. She had to be on insulin shots for 6 months before she was allowed to go on a pump. Mm-hmm. And so we had to measure and weigh and count everything that she ate. And if she didn't, and she had to take insulin in the morning for what she was going to eat at lunch. And so if she absolutely had to eat everything that she had planned, if she was hungry or not. And then if she wanted more, that required her to have another insulin shot. So it was very stressful, and it was just a really traumatic time for our family. And so everything started with my mindful eating practice started to fall apart. All of a sudden I couldn't do it anymore. I was really frustrated with like having her eating be so controlled and manipulated. And so that's what prompted me to get my first health coaching certification. Just was like, I needed to do something. And so this is what I decided to do.
Yeah.
And it really just opened my eyes to a lot of things about like what I wasn't doing that when I thought I was really healthy, I really wasn't as healthy as I thought. But I still wasn't able to go back to eating mindfully on a regular basis. And I couldn't figure out why that was true. And so I sort of just stumbled along for a couple of years and tried to mindfully eat, but I just couldn't do it.
Okay.
And then I was listening to like sort of a show, we used to be like what you used to do instead of listen to podcasts. It was
yes.
still have summits, but they're not quite as popular as they used to be. And I learned about this other certification, and they talked about sort of the psychological part of eating. And the spiritual part of eating. And so that is what I tried to get, that certification. And that's sort of what introduced me to the impact that stress has on your ability to do what you want to do. And that is when I started to really understand why, even though I wanted to eat mindfully and I knew it had worked for me in the past, that I wasn't able to do it because obviously the situation with my daughter was very, very stressful for lots of different reasons. And so my body was just in this constant stress state. And that's why I wasn't able to eat mindfully. So it was really on focusing on reducing the stress, which finally enabled me to sort of like regulate my nervous system and get back to a place where I could just eat what my body needed and not just be amped up all the time. And so that was sort of the journey that got me to wanting to share that sort of process with other people.
Okay. Oh, wow. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of things that I think our listeners will definitely relate to, whether it be stress just in our lives, stress with the children. You had an added thing happen to you where your daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And, like you said, for those who are familiar with it, type 1 is different than type 2, where it has nothing to do with what you eat or lifestyle. It's just your pancreas isn't producing insulin to help your body, process sugar. And that's really stressful. I have some friends and family members, no one directly related to me, but folks that I know whose children were diagnosed. And I don't know, were you dealing with, having to wake her up in the middle of the night for shots, or what was it like that? Or tell us a little more about that journey.
So when she didn't need shots, she would need sugar in the middle of the night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So she would go, every once in a while she would go high, but it was really more that she would go low in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And some type 1 diabetics wake up when they go low. My daughter really didn't. And then there's a phenomenon where when you exercise, you have like a delayed response of pushing out blood sugar. So she would go to sports because she was in middle school, she would go to sports and then she would be, we would test her blood sugar before she went to bed and she would be fine. And then like around 11 or 12 o'clock at night, her blood sugar would start to crash. And so we would like go in and test her like in the middle of the night and see where her blood sugar was. And then if she was low, we would wake her up and make her drink juice. And then like we would be sleeping and we would have this thought, like, I feel like she's low, and you would just have this gut instinct.
Wow.
And so we would get and then once you have that thought in your head, like you can't go back to sleep. So then you go in and you test her. And then, my husband would do it, not as much as I did it, but he would do it. And but there was enough times that she was actually really, really low when we did that. And she could go into a coma, like a diabetic coma. And so it's just really like, you're just on edge all the time that she's going to go into a diabetic coma and never wake up. And so that you just live your life in that like panic. And so like, no wonder I wasn't able to lose weight. Like I was stressed all the time.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Which is a stressor also. Like, yeah. So it's not really that surprising when you learn how stress impacts your ability to, get your body into a relaxed state where it can digest food properly, where it can like absorb nutrients properly. Like you just realize how much it was impacting and your ability to make decisions that are good for you.
Oh, for sure. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about, your journey. So you started with the mindful eating, which is such a powerful tool if you are able to do it, like you said. And then you started to see like, I'm just not able to do this for some reason. Yeah. Realizing that it was the stress, and I think you call it the chronic stress loop that we get in.
Yes.
But yeah, so talk a little more about, what you just mentioned. You started to talk about like that rest and digest or being able to make decisions. So tell us more about what you discovered and then how you're helping others with that.
Sure. So when I got my second certification, I sort of came up with this concept called the chronic stress loop. And so you'll have some sort of stressor, and obviously not everyone's stressor is as big as having their child, diagnosed with a lifelong.
Yes.
But it could be anything. And so when I work with teens, we talk more about specifically things that teens would be stressed about. So that would be more, like lack of study skills or, peer pressure, social media, things like that. And so, but parents could be going through a divorce. They could be going through they themselves are going through a chronic illness. Lots of kids are diagnosed with things. They get excluded. They get laughed at when they raise their hand. Someone makes fun of the skirt that they're wearing, or it could be something huge. It could be something small. It doesn't really matter. If it activates the stress response, I talk to lots of parents and they're like, her life is great. Like, what does she have to be stressed about? And I was
right.
like, I get you. I hear you. And I understand that you think what she's stressed about is not important, but it doesn't matter what you think. If it's stressing her out and taking her body out of that relaxed state, she is in the stress response. Mm-hmm. And then once you're in a stress response, your body is programmed to get you back into a relaxed state as quickly as possible. And so it'll start bombarding you with these thoughts like, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're fat, you're a loser. So whatever stressor has come up, you have this inner critic that starts telling you all the reasons why you suck, right? And then that increases your stress even more. And so then you need to get back to that relaxed state. So you rely on your default habit. And so for the teens I work with, they are in the habit of using food to soothe their stress. And lots of teens do other things. Yeah. It could be, spacing out on social media. They could be procrastinating. They could be, like chronic gossipers, and so they get their confidence and reduce stress when they, sort of make them like build themselves up by putting other people down. Like there's just like, so, they could be vaping, like lots of things that teens can be doing. But the teens I specifically work with are the ones that use food. And food is a very socially acceptable way to soothe your stress. So lots of teens don't even realize there's anything wrong with it because it's kind of almost glorified. Mm-hmm. I have this one story that my daughter was watching Friends and then someone was broken up. I think maybe Joey got broken up with and he didn't understand like this concept of being broken up with. And so Monica and Rachel like went in and they were giving him ice cream. And she was like, my daughter was, I think she was, I don't know, she was like a tween. And she was like, I can't wait till I break up with someone and I can eat a whole pint of ice cream. How's that a life goal of yours? Like, what is happening?
Right?
It's an example of how ingrained it is in our culture to use food to soothe uncomfortable emotions. But eventually, once you have a default habit, if it becomes your go-to way to reduce stress, then you just sort of start doing it automatically, even if you don't want to. And that's where people are like, I don't understand why I can't stop eating candy all the time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, because I was constantly in the stress state. And my go-to way to do that was to eat gross amounts of like gummy bears and Hasbro raspberries and brownies. And that was just how I dealt with it. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't eat mindfully because I was just eating all that food. And so when you develop these habits as teenagers, they really follow you into adulthood. And so eventually, and sometimes, you can make it through your teen years, depending on your metabolism, and it really doesn't impact your weight.
Right.
It might impact your body confidence, and it's certainly not great for your health, which teens don't really care about.
No.
But and so once you have those unwanted manifestations, then that becomes an additional stressor. So if you're feeling uncomfortable about your body, if you feel embarrassed about how you look, then that's an additional stressor. And then you just you go back to the loop, and it just gets more and more and more intense, and you just can't get yourself out of it. And then you blame yourself.
Yes.
You don't blame anything else. You're like, oh, I don't have any willpower. I have no self-control. I'm a loser. And you just start again with the inner critic, right? And it's just this horrible.
For sure. Well, I think that's one really important thing you said is it's a habit, and then you do it automatically. And that's something that I talk about a lot in my coaching business too, is, creating healthy habits where it just becomes what you do. But many of us have, and we all have healthy habits too, but many of us have those unhealthy or habits that aren't serving us. And it's true. You're like, why am I still driving to the gas station to get, a Mountain Dew and a candy bar? Or why do I keep going to get ice cream out of the freezer or whatever? It's like you're not even thinking about it. So I love what you're doing. I think that was what drew me to you and wanted to have you on the podcast, is working with teens and helping them build those good habits and really knowing why it's important at that age so it doesn't carry into adulthood. So I just love that.
Yeah, because your example is perfect. You're driving to get something, and so a big strategy that a lot of people who are sort of in this diet culture use is like, oh, I just don't have it in my house. I was like, well, you get your car. So that's not a really great strategy. And so one of the things that I talk about is that if you're really craving something, then that's just a signal that your body is in the stress response, and you can sort of maybe figure out what's going on and then work on that. It's never about the food. It's always about what triggered you to want the food in the first place. And if you can get better at noticing that and then having strategies in place to reduce the stress that triggered you to want the food, and then making decisions based on, that actually work for your lifestyle. I'm going to be at a birthday party, and it's actually going to feel more stressful to not participate in this cake eating. Unless you have a celiac, unless you have something that really, really makes you feel awful. But if I really don't like cake that much, but I feel weird not eating it, and I want to be part of the celebration, I'm going to choose to eat it. Making decisions based on, it's not always the best decision to say no to something. Sometimes it makes sense to say yes. And then and then the other times it makes sense. And just knowing that you have the power to make those choices, and you don't have to do something automatically just because it's in front of you. Because maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's, your dad's 33rd birthday, and it's not a big deal. It's not that big a deal. So not if you don't really like the cake, then don't eat it. It's
yes.
fine.
Right. So it's definitely circumstantial. And, I think let's talk a little more about that. So what are some of the strategies and techniques that you recommend to the teens that you're working with, and even the moms who are trying to help their teens? So, but if you have that urge to grab the bag of gummy worms that are sitting right there, and I'm with you, gummy things are my thing as well.
It feels so ridiculous because they're so just not good.
Yeah. I don't know, the texture, the taste. But yeah, so what are some of the, you already mentioned a little bit about noticing, but what are some of the techniques and strategies you recommend to help your clients?
So what I recommend is having parents help their teens build what I call a balanced body blueprint. And so what that is there are 5 different types of habit shifts. And so you want to help your teens find ones in all 5 categories. So
Okay.
the first one is increasing stress resilience. And so these would be strategies like, breathing techniques that are going to sort of bring your nervous system back into a relaxed state. The one that I really love and fell in love with when I was doing this work was the emotional freedom technique, or tapping. But there's so many ways, there's so many somatic practices to regulate your nervous system. I've heard even something as simple as, you just rub your temples like this and that stimulates the vagus nerve. And so just something, but having like a toolbox of strategies that if you feel that your body is in that stress response, you know how to get yourself back into a relaxed state. And so there's a million different ones you could do. And then the second one is increase balanced nutrition. And so that is more finding the balance between, eating the foods that, you actually need to fuel your body and have the energy and the focus to get through your school day. And then, still going to Chick-fil-A with your friends or whatever you want to do, and having a balance between that and helping your team find that balance would be the second thing that I would work on. And then the third thing is increasing peace and joy. And so this is adding things into your teen's life that either make them feel peaceful or make them more joyful. So for an example of joyful would be, hobbies, joining a team, spending time with friends, like things that just make life more joyful. And things that are peaceful would be, maybe cleaning your room, making your bed, having better study habits, like things that increase people's peace that aren't necessarily joyful.
Yeah, true. Making our bed may not bring us joy, but then it's
make you feel peaceful if your environment is calm. If you don't have good study habits, that can feel very stressful. So a lot of what I help teens do, I was a teacher for 20 years. So I work with kids with learning disabilities. So I have so many strategies that teach kids how to study better, depending on their learning style. And so I have, there's lots of different ways to help kids study that works well for them, and helping them figure out what that is. Having better time management can make them feel more peaceful. So things like that. And then the fourth category is positive self-talk. And so that's quieting that inner critic, listening, like learning to listen to when you're calling yourself a stupid idiot or a fat loser or whatever you call yourself. And having strategies to replace those with positive self-talk. So that's a lot of mantras, a lot of stop interrupting patterns. There's lots of, great app is called the Think Up app. And that's an app where you can, record mantras and then just listen to them. So a lot of teens like doing that. Oh my
gosh, I love that.
So that's a really great app. And then the last one is self-trust. So increasing self-trust. And that is sort of where the mindful eating part comes in. And so it's like, what is my body? What am I really hungry for? Do I really need food right now? Am I eating just out of habit? And then also your values. So not just going with what your friends are doing, and really deciding for yourself what you want. And then just standing in that because you paid attention to what you want, versus just everybody else is doing this, so I'm going to go do that. So one of my children was amazingly good at this, and my other one was so she was I don't want that. So she never wanted whatever was in ever. And my son was the opposite. If it was in, he wanted it. And so he was very grounded in what she wanted, and he was just everyone's having it, I want it. And so it neither is wrong, because that worked for him. That made him feel secure. And doing her own thing made her feel secure. So neither is right or wrong, but it's just knowing what you want and trusting yourself that you have yourself. And that just builds confidence, and then reduces stress. So those are the 5 categories that are on the blueprint. And so you want to help your teen develop skills in all 5 categories, because that is really going to balance. And a lot of things when we see our teens maybe feeling insecure about how they're looking, our go-to way, because that's how we were raised and that's how we were taught. And that's like a lot of all we know is that, oh, if you just lose a little weight, you'll feel better. And even kids who aren't overweight are like, I feel fat. And I'm like, no. Like, you feel uncomfortable about something and you don't know how to express that. So you're saying I feel fat. And so that is just, those are the 5.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's great. I mean, I think it really, each of those 5 components or categories really do touch on really what we all need to be doing, not just teens. But I think, again, I love that you're working with folks, as they're developing those good or bad habits, as they're learning to trust themselves. I think that last one really hit home for me, because I think personally, that's still something I'm working on, of like trusting what I like, what I don't like, what is, holding in my values. And I think I used to think I did pretty well at that, but then you evaluate things, you're like, well, maybe in this area I did, but maybe not in all parts of my life. So that's wonderful.
A phenomenon with teenagers, especially that they're rewarded for being outgoing and talking a lot in class. And Susan Cain wrote the book Quiet. And so that was this first thing as an educator, where it's like, if everybody talked as much as you say you want your students to talk, like nobody would you would be like, shh, shh. There's value in people who are quiet also. And so I think that's just like, do I prefer to be quiet? Do I prefer big parties, or do I like just going out to lunch with people? Like you sort of like, oh, I'm never invited to all these big parties, but maybe that's just not your thing. And do you really care?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're just like, oh my gosh, I wasn't invited. And you just feel bad about yourself.
Yes.
And so, it's like, oh, that person has a big group of friends and I only have one good friend. Well, do I really like spending time with this friend? Like, is that something that I want to make a change about? Or do I actually feel okay because I really value this one friendship I have, and for now that's good enough? And so it's just like not automatically feeling bad because you're not what somebody else values.
Mm-hmm.
And so it could be really, really helpful to help kids sort of decide that for themselves. And then make decisions based on that versus based on what even their sibling is doing or what their parent likes.
Yes, totally. And you're totally right with we live in an extroverted world. And so when you're an introvert, and like you said, you may not even want to do those things, but it's the peer pressure, especially as a teen, social medias, we could open up a whole big can of worms with that one, but just seeing everyone show everything. And I think arming our children with how to listen to their bodies, their intuition, and they're still developing who they are and what they want. But I just love that.
Yeah. It's especially important. I've worked with a lot of teens over the years who were adopted. And sometimes, teens' natural instincts are, because they're not biologically, sort of replicas of their parents. They could be very, very different than their parents. Whereas if you give birth biologically, you're like, oh, well, she's kind of like my brother, or that's like, like you can sort of see it in your family. And whereas when you are adopted, you can just, sometimes you don't know how to, I see parents struggling to relate to their kids because they're so different than them, and they don't have a person they're like that person. Like, I don't know how to deal with this person because I've never dealt with this type of person in my life before. Now I'm raising this person. And so that I see a lot of tension between parents and teens that way. So it can be really especially important for those types of, and sometimes people adopt children and they're exactly the same as them. And it's like, it doesn't necessarily happen that way, but it's just an example of a population who can really feel off in the teenagers.
Well, that leads me right to my next question, actually. So what can parents do, whether it be modeling good behaviors or actions they can take, or inaction? Maybe it's not, what are some things they can do to support their teens?
Well, I think so. If they feel like the 5 types of healthy habit shifts that I shared, like that's what I would work on. And so if parents want to, they can I have a free guide to how to help your teams build a balanced body blueprint with examples of how to do it. And then on my Instagram, I share regularly different types of healthy habit shifts. So if you want some ideas, they could go there and look, or they could, they're also welcome to schedule a free parent consultation with me if they just want to get some ideas of where to start building their blueprint. But I really do feel like having that sort of framework that these are the 5 areas that I want my teen to work on. And then in the blueprint, it explains this, but just for context, you really want to start very, very small.
Okay, I was about to say 5 seems kind of overwhelming. So yeah, keep going. Tell us about that.
If you wanted to do 5 things in each category, that you could start with 5. But for an example, say stress resilience, it's like, whenever you feel stress, you're going to do the 5-5-7 breath. So that's simply breathing in for the count of 5, holding your breath for the count of 5, and exhaling for the count of 7. So you're just whenever stress comes up, you're going to do this, and you're just going to put that on their blueprint. So that's just something that they can easily work into their day. That doesn't feel very stressful. And then, for the balanced body nutrition, maybe it's I'm going to eat, cucumbers at lunch 3 times a week. And that's it.
Love it. Yeah, no, that's perfect.
So it's just, but maybe your teen eats vegetables all the time, and that doesn't make any sense. So it's let's do something a little bit more. So it's really depending on where your teen is and also what their stressors are. So if they have, if they're if you're going through a really contentious divorce right now, maybe self-regulation is the most important thing for them. So it's really also knowing where what's triggering your teen, or if your teen's really having a hard time socially, maybe that joy and peace part is the most important thing to focus on, and really finding a different outlet for them to have some success socially if it's not happening at school. So it really depends on what's going on in your teen's life, but start with at least 1. If you want to do all 5, that's fine. And really just start with what is stressing your teen out the most. And if you don't know, that would be something that we could also, I could help you sort of figure that out just by asking questions, because I've been working with teens for so long. It's easy for me to drill down and figure it out pretty quickly.
Yeah, definitely seek help from an expert or someone who's done that. Because, the thing that popped in my head, and so I have 2 who are no longer teens, and then I have a tween. But one thing that popped in my head was well, what if they don't want to hear anything I have to say? What if the parent, and I'm sure folks listening could relate, some of us have their teens are all up in our business. They love listening to us. They think we're great. And then others are no, Mom, I don't want to talk about this, or that, leave me alone. I'm fine.
Yeah. So
in that situation,
in a situation where a teen is not interested, then there's really no point in
okay.
Because, and that's why, I really focus on sort of that maintaining a feel-good weight and positive body image when I work with teens, because that's sort of the hook for them, right? They don't feel good about their body or their weight, and they want to do something about it. And so when I work with teens and parents who are in that situation, the teens want it.
Yeah.
And so they're willing to do it. Other examples of teens who really want it are kids who struggle with ADD or ADHD. And when they work with me and they learn all of the ways that food's impacting their ability to focus and have success in school, and they start seeing it for themselves, then they're more motivated to do it. But you kind of need a hook. If your teen is really just naturally thin and can eat anything they want. And like, if they don't want it, like there's not going to be a reason for them to sort of attach themselves to wanting to do a balanced body blueprint. Like, it's probably not going to work for them. So really the best way to go about that would be to model it to them and be a person
Love that.
who has this balanced body blueprint. And like, oh, like I feel really stressed today. I did the 5-5-7 breath. I feel so much better. Like, oh my gosh, like this woman said the rudest thing to me at work today. And I started being so mean to myself. And I just realized I have to let it go. That's her opinion. And that doesn't matter to me. And so it's like, you can just model it. And sometimes that's the only thing that you can do as a parent. And, you know, you just know that you're being a good example of what it looks like to be a person who is at peace in their own body and who has a healthy relationship with food and their body. And if you can be that for your kids, then, you know, eventually their bad habits will catch up with them. And it really depends on their metabolism. Like for me, it was I could eat whatever I wanted in high school and it did not matter. It wasn't until I hit college. My father has a metabolism. He was almost 50 before he started gaining weight from his.
Wow. Yeah.
So it really depends. But for most people, it's in their 20s when they stop growing. And they've been eating so much food as teenagers because they needed it, especially boys. But my daughter is, you know, she's a 5'8" and has a bigger body. So she actually also ate a lot of food. I think if you're more, you probably don't need as much food because you're not growing as much.
Yeah.
But she is a bigger person. So she was also ate a lot. And then you stop growing and if you don't stop eating like you were eating, then you're going to gain weight automatically. And so that could be a hook if your teen is going into college, because there is that, like, this is what happens to a lot of people when they go to college. Do you want to put some habits into place before you go so that you can avoid this? You know, that might be a way to hook your teen into making these shifts. But if they're really resistant,
that's a great, it's almost like a duh moment. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I mean, we're not going to force, but I think what you expressed about modeling the good behavior and, you know, that's where my coaching comes in. So if the mom is really looking to change their behaviors, and it's not easy, as you said, the chronic stress loop. I love that you have that, and just you can just picture like it triggers, and you're in the loop again, and those triggers. So and then really supporting our children, our teens, to help them, grow up to be healthy, happy, successful, fulfilled adults in a world that's not getting less stressful. Let's just, that stressors are going to come, and having those tools in our tool belt is just so important. So I absolutely love that.
It's an unavoidable part of life. Like it really is. Like things are going to happen that activate the stress response. But the more you're built, the more that you have these habits are your automatic default habits, are habits that actually help you decrease stress. You're just going to be able to handle it better without turning to things that actually work against what you want.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that you wish I would have asked about, or anything else you wanted to talk about today to share with our listeners?
I feel like we went over everything. I feel like I gave a pretty good scope, but I think, just for someone who's worked with teens for so long, is that there's not one right way or wrong way to do it. And if you try something and your teen hates it or it doesn't work for them, then just try something else. And the other thing that that's so hard as a parent is that when things happen to our teens, it triggers us. And it brings back all
yes.
Right, from being in middle school and being in high school, and we want to help them solve these problems, and that can sometimes push our teens away. And so finding little ways to support them by validating their experiences, and saying like, I hear you, and listening to them, versus like always trying to problem solve for them, can really help them regulate themselves. Cause they're like, oh, like this feeling feels true, and my parent is validating it for me, so I can now relax and get back into a relaxed state. So that is just that doesn't have anything really to do with anything else I talked about, but it's just something that's really hard as a parent.
No, absolutely.
I am 100% not good at it. But my kids are older now. My kids are, I don't even want to say, my son is 25. That feels crazy old to me. So I have a 22-year-old and a 25-year-old now.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I just try to so now I just try to listen and do not give advice. And my daughter's great about it. She's like, Mom, I did not call for advice. I called for you to listen to me complain. I was like, okay, sorry.
It is so hard. And I mean, that's just the evolution of parenting too, where it's like you pretty much have to tell them what to do at some point. But once they get into those tween and teen years, and it's the push and pull, and I think I think what you just said was perfect to round out this conversation, that there really isn't a one size fits all. And, even between your kids, and you mentioned that with your two kids, same with me. I mean, one thing that worked with my daughters, and I always put them together because they're twins, but even them as twins, something would work with one and not the other. And then I have a son who none of that. It's like I just need to throw that out the window and start over. So, but yeah, it is just, it's letting go of some of that. And it's so hard as a parent, because you mentioned it too. Something goes wrong with your child and you're like, oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, this is because I was this way, and you have that negative self-talk, and there you are back in that loop. So
to not just feel like your heart just aches for them and you just want to solve it for them, but really helping them solve it for themselves is the best thing that you can do.
Yeah.
Just be that person, like compassionate person for them, and just them knowing that you're always there for them to touch on you.
I love that. That's great.
That's super great advice for any.
Well,
other than a parenting coach.
Yeah, right. We'll find someone else to talk about that.
It's like, what would you tell, your younger parent? I'm like, don't bring your own trauma into your child's life.
Gosh, I know. Well, you're starting this starting this cycle of like healing our teens with their things so that they can like carry that on, and again, to be those productive, happy, healthy adults. And then exactly. They get to figure it out.
Like some of the things that happened to me, in my teenage years, and if I had something besides candy to help me like work through that, like I would have been in such a better place as an adult. And I was like, what if I like had all of this whole toolkit of practices that actually made me feel better?
Yeah,
that would have been amazing.
Totally.
But I have it now, so. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, tell us all where you can be found. So you mentioned you've got a freebie, so we'll definitely link that in the show notes, but where else can they reach out to you? And again, we'll share those links, but how can we find you?
So my website is claireketchum.com, and then I'm on Instagram at claireketchum.ck. And if you wanted to get a copy of, a free copy of the Balanced Body Blueprint, you can do that on my website. You can have a link in my Instagram bio if you wanted to grab a copy of it. So either way, that would be a great place to start.
Good. Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely link all of that. And then if folks are interested in learning more, they can connect with you. Well, my final question that I'm asking all my guests is, tell us about either a daily or regular practice that you have that makes you either feel wild or freed.
I think that, this is so interesting because I have to take my own advice sometimes and trust that I know best for myself. And I am currently 53. And so I follow a lot of people on Instagram who are helping people in their midlife. And it's all about eat protein, eat protein, eat protein. I mean, like so much protein.
Yeah, it has to be our life now. Our life's work is yes.
And then, and I started fasting when my daughter was diagnosed with diabetes because, you know, I started learning about blood sugar and she doesn't do it. She was like, not for me, but I loved it. And my husband, actually, we both really liked it. So we both fast. And then I started following this person and she said, you know, you really shouldn't fast every day. It's not good for you. And you should really do these like 48-hour fast and then a 24-hour fast. And so I keep on like, you shouldn't fast every day. You shouldn't fast every day. And so I started trying to eat more protein and I started shortening my fast. And I was like, I don't feel as good. I'm so bloated. I don't know what's going on. And I paused. And so finally I was like, you know, I just, you know, doubling down on my like meditating for a little bit longer and really like, what is going on? Am I stressed about something? And really just like tuning into myself. And finally I was like, you know what? I feel like this is because I started shortening my fast and trying to eat all this protein, and I'm just gonna like not do that anymore.
Yeah.
So that was like maybe like 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, I feel so much better.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I love what you said. You have to listen to your own advice. Like what feels good to you, even though, yes, the experts, and you'll hear one person say, fast every day. The next person will say, no, you need to fast only once a week or whatever, you know, but yeah, listening to your body is what you needed to do. I love it.
Yeah. So that it's always coming back to like trusting that if you're really tuned into your body, you can figure out what works best for you. But even as somebody who teaches I also ignore my advice until I'm like, wait, what is going on?
Oh my gosh. Coaches are normal people too.
100%. So I guess that makes me like, it just freed me up again, right? And like, so that's in the sense of just being, because it's not diet culture. It's just like my body is going through, you know, menopause and I don't know anything about it. And it's very similar to teenagers, you know, their whole metabolisms change so drastically when they go out of that from that teen to the 20s. And it's kind of, we're going the other direction, right? We're going from like being able to eat a lot to like, you're not really don't need to eat as much as you get older.
Yeah.
You know, your metabolism changes and you need to pay attention. And so I thought I was doing really, really well. But also,
well, you tuned in. Yeah, you tuned back into you. So that's a great message. Great way to finish this conversation and just remind people like, hey, if something doesn't feel right, just notice, you know, take a moment, pause and see what's going on. And, you know, what you said just before that, like if it doesn't work, try something else. Yeah. So wonderful message. Well, thank you, Claire. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us. I think our listeners will definitely get a lot from this conversation and you know, to support themselves, but also their children. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity. It was fun to chat with you today.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. The takeaways for this episode were, number 1, stress affects all parts of our life, specifically digesting food and making good decisions for yourself and your body. Number 2, the chronic stress loop. You have a stressor, you are in the stress response, and the body wants to get you back into a relaxed state. So you rely on a habit that gets you back in that place. So in this episode, we talked a lot about using food to get us back to a relaxed state. Number 3, stressors for teens can really be anything, big or small. Number 4, food is a socially acceptable way to soothe stress. 5, cravings are a signal that you are in a stress response. Notice this. I really love that she said that. Just take notice when you go to grab, maybe it's food or maybe there's another distraction that you use to try to help you get out of a stress state. She also said, it's never about the food. So how can we put strategies in place to help work through it? So even though this episode was really about teens and how Claire coaches and helps teens in this phase of life and how they can self-regulate, man, we could use this for ourselves as well, these tips and tools. Number 6, parents can help teens find strategies to help them have a balanced life. And she talks about her freebie, the Balanced Body Blueprint, and there's 5 categories for habit shifts. So if you didn't jot those down, go back or go grab that freebie and the link in the show notes. Number 7, one way to help or assist your teen is by modeling healthy behaviors. Number 8, if you try something and your teen hates it, well, just try something new, try something different. And then number 9, supporting your teens, validating their feelings, and allowing them to self-regulate is one of the most important things we can do for them. Thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next time. Stay wild. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I hope you feel free to take action toward building the life of your dreams. If something in this episode resonated with you, I would so appreciate it if you would text it to a girlfriend so she can hear the message as well. Until next time, stay wild.